I'm Becca Smith, a solution architect at NetGain. I'm a CPA and started my career at Deloitte in their business tax service group. My legendary co-host, Chris Miller, is our VP of product strategy at NetGain. He was at NetSuite for over 6 years, solutioning with some of their largest enterprise clients. He's a CPA and has served in roles such as controller, director of finance, and CFO. So let's jump in and tackle today's topic. Okay, well, hi, Chris.
Hey, Becca.
I think we are getting together today to talk about solutioning and just kind of general NetSuite solutioning, kind of getting into the details, different problems people may face, but really the traits that you exemplify throughout your entire career. And then also what I've been trying to exemplify as I've moved into this role and really kind of taken it on here at NetGain, and what is most valuable within that role, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be great. That's a good topic we used to talk about all the time, like when I was at NetSuite in different places. So, I'd love to hear from you first, as you've come into this and kind of came from public accounting and somewhat of a change sometimes when people think of the stereotypical personality.
Yeah.
What have you found that you really like about pre-sales and solution consulting, and what have you found has made you successful so far, and kind of what do you see as the future things?
Yeah, all right, I'll go first then.
Right.
So with solutioning, I would say what makes me successful and actually not even be successful, but feel successful when I'm on a call with a client is when I'm able to connect with them and their actual problem. It always feels really good when they start describing a problem and I can already tell them, oh, I've seen it with this client and I have an idea of how we can approach that. It actually happened to me today on a call.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've seen this one before. And so I would say getting as much exposure as you can up front to different types of problems is really helpful as I've continued and are in this position. As far as asking good questions, listening, being able to remember what clients are telling you, being able to make connections. I don't know, I'm trying to think of something actionable, right? Maybe having a list and going through and writing myself of everything that NetSuite offers, everything that our products offer as far as actual features go, and then looking at what is most important or usually typically most relevant to them, and then kind of making those connections in the system, even if they're not even directly related, just the actual functionality, how it works.
That's great. It's funny, when I first started out, it was kind of like the exact same thing. I approached a lot of it from being coming from accounting, I have to be the answer man or right away. But as I went through it, I found kind of just you're finding actually a lot quicker than me, is the ability, well, no, but the ability to listen and hear what it is that is really the problem, and then say, oh yeah, I have done this or done that, because I would sometimes jump to conclusions or do that. So I think that's a really, really good trait. When I would mentor a lot of the SCs, or people would ask me for advice, that was always the first thing I would tell them is, it's funny, but solution consulting, a lot of it is not, you have to have really good technical skills. You have to have really good presentation skills, but the most important thing is that first thing you mentioned, this curiosity and loving to learn, but wanting to be curious about what people are doing and really understanding it. Because so many times we have had a few projects at NetSuite where I would even be with the executive team, and sometimes we'd be like, I don't know how we're here, or why they want to talk to us, or we belong here. But what came from that almost always was that they thought we understood them better than everybody else, than the other systems. We listened. They felt like, you've got it. It's kind of this, aha, that's right. You get what we're trying to do and why we want to do it. And that was really, I think, the trait that makes the most difference. So that's great that you've already noticed that and seen that, because that'll serve you really well.
Well, thank you. It helps that I sat with you when I started this job and said, what do I need to focus on? But I definitely think it's true. I've definitely seen it as I've been working in this position now. that it's when those clients say, yeah, that's exactly it. That's when you know you're on like a good track with them.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly it. And it's funny because it's not so much your presentation. You'll have some things where you feel like you're motoring through things, and that's what they want to do. Other times it feels like you got through a quarter of the stuff, and it's like, quote unquote, getting through the material is not near as important as like just that, understanding that you understand what I'm looking to do, why and how. And so, yeah, that kind of becomes, because even people don't see every screen. As soon as they figure out you really know what you're talking about and you understand what they're doing, people will actually they will make assumptions in your favor. Well, they showed me this, that was right, so I am sure they're fine with this, even if you didn't do it. And so that's always really helpful, being able to help people relax, let their guard down, so to speak, and really talk with you.
So I guess that actually brings up another question that I've actually hit in my own job. If I don't know how their job works or how their processes work, right? And I'm sitting on the call with them and they're describing something and I'm having a hard time explaining, a lot of the times I'll ask them, can you show me your process in your own software currently? Is there like a good way to go about that? I mean, I've heard some people call it like reverse demos, where you have the client demo to you what they're currently doing. Have you like done those and had success with that?
Yeah, so there have been several times when we've had to do that. So kind of, if we back up, when you get into that position, sometimes the first thing you do, and it's funny because many times, like the thing they would say, Chris, you come in here and cover if there's anything, and sometimes I won't know, and sometimes I'll read the room and realize I know, but like everybody else doesn't know, but they're scared to ask.
Yeah.
So almost always we'll stop and say, all right, I have to ask you guys a really stupid question. But when you phrase it as like, I'm going to ask you something dumb, or this may be the dumbest thing you hear all today, but sometimes you have to ask those very basic things. Not even so much as like, sometimes you know, sometimes you don't know, but even just to help people feel comfortable and explain. And sometimes I'll look around and think, the people around me may not know what's going on, but they're worried about asking. So if I do, I give them permission to then they feel like they can ask questions and do that. So that would be my first thing, is never be afraid to ask a really dumb question, because you may be like, I'm just not getting this, and that doesn't make people think less of you. They actually, it helps validate that you really want to understand, you want to make sure you didn't miss anything. And then
you've seen clients tend to like appreciate those types of like questions and approaches.
Yeah. So it's like, it's one thing if you come in and you're like, so do you guys do like accounting and stuff? Like that.
Yeah, that part's not going to go over well.
That won't go over well. But once it takes people about 1 minute to 2 minutes after you're talking to realize you know what you're talking about, that you have skills. So if you stop and say, guys, I have a question I'm just not getting, can we go back to this? They don't look at that as, oh, what's wrong with Becca? She's not getting it. They most universally people say, oh, I must not have explained it right, or you need extra clarification.
Well, I mean, I think that when I'm on a demo and they ask me questions.
Yep, and then that's exactly, and then most time people will go back and they will spend the time to help you understand it, because there's a lot of foundational things like you got to get right before you worry about, oh, we have this or this. The other thing that comes with that, when you want to do a reverse demo, I actually do those quite a bit. So when you got into some of these enterprise deals, we would be like, okay, let me see how you're doing it. And I always will ask for like documents or journal entries, or could we walk through like what the journal entries or even the T accounts would work?
I find journal entries so helpful, because at the end of the day, like NetSuite is a financial platform, I feel like. And so knowing what journal entries they want is so helpful to be able to figure out like what processes I can put in place to get that end result. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters, is that like your GL is your GL is correct, but your journal entries are correct, and then your income statement, balance sheet are correct.
You're exactly right. So like literally, in my mind, I always follow, and sometimes it varies, but for the most part, I always start with, let's talk about the reports. And those could be the journals, the reports, and you work backwards from there. So many people want to start at the front of this, but if you start like what I need to see in a report, then you walk back to what kind of data do I need to capture to generate that report. Then you go back one more step and say, what does the process or the workflow look like to get that information? So you
you actually make the workflows a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, if you see when I get on there, I will use my terrible PowerPoint skills, but I will draw boxes and say, let's talk through this and walk through this. And the reason why that's helpful is suddenly now people connect the report to the data to like what I have to do to capture that. And you can use that for sales, procurement, procure to pay, order to cash, record to report. Every process should be able to be, if you can break it down to a series of boxes, then we can talk about what's in each box. And then that's usually where I go into, if we need to say, we either need, show me what an invoice looks like, or show me what the journals look like so we can figure out this box. Or, for example, we have a great customer right now that is in the oil and gas industry, and they have a homegrown maintenance system that they built. And that one we could talk about it all day, but literally it took sitting with them 8-9 hours, having their people show me walk through so that I could draw my little boxes, but understand exactly how everything goes through. And when you get that, that's usually really, really helpful. And after you've built kind of confidence with them, that's when they will be more than happy to share, because they'll be like, okay, you probably need to see how we're doing this. But almost always kind of like on a pre-sales, if you can understand get the journals, that's like a great thing. And then there's usually two other things. Before I would do a reverse demo, do that, I always ask people like kind of what are your segments look like? Because while it seems boring, what's your account, subsidiary, I always ask for more than that, because I tell them the whole way you organize your reportings is typically in these segments. So then we say, okay, well, what are we looking at? Why do we have this one, and what do we do with it? And you kind of get back to that. And then I want to understand a couple of things. You want to make sure you understand kind of how they break out their general ledger, because that controls like reporting, who gets, what are the incentives, how do commissions work. You can derive like all of that from a lot of that. And then I always tell people, and sometimes they don't think about it, but most people understand in an industry, everything runs off of 3 or 4 key ratios. There's 3 or 4 KPIs. Break out all the others. There's these 3 or 4 big ones. Whether like at NetGain, we're a SaaS company, we've got the few. But like when I was at ClearChoice and we did healthcare and dental, there were 3 or 4. It was how many people came in, were literally sitting in the dentist chair on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. How many people did we talk to about doing a procedure, because that ultimately translated in, kind of flowed through. And so when I know those two, now we can kind of see why they're doing everything. But one of the great things now, when you're ready to move from there, move in a reverse demo, what I think it gives people, it gives you 2 or 3 things that you wouldn't get otherwise. First is, you learn their language. Like, one of the most important things is using the words that people are used to using. So being old and around way too much, but I've had to see like all these different systems, Great Plains, JD Edwards, QuickBooks, Intact. And then a lot of them that I'd never even heard of, I've learned about and taught myself. So when I find out someone's coming from like a JD Edwards world, or they're coming from Great Plains, I will shift how I talk about things. To one customer, we're talking about dimensions of the general ledger. The next one, we're talking about the code block, and that helps you enter their world. So when you see the reverse demo, first thing you want to do is be like, how do I enter their world? And I can start using the names of their processes. Because,
and I think it's important to like almost write those down if you're not like familiar with them. Like sometimes I literally write down like they call this.
Yes.
Because that makes it helpful for me to be able to remember, like, don't call it a segment, call it a code block, because that's going to be what their brain processes so much faster.
Yep, that's exactly it. And then they have a hook in their brain to say, now I know what you're doing, and it creates clarity. And you're smart to write those down, because normally I go, I forgot what you guys called that, and you have to tell me
I also
again.
make comments like that plenty often, like, oh, that word that starts with a W that you just used. But
but that's really good. And so what you come away with on these is kind of a seeing of like, what does their process look like in clicks? What is the result? And then what is the language they use? Not every customer or prospect or person will, be willing to sit down and kind of do that much. But when they are, it becomes really, especially kind of like in some of the things we do that's, a leasing system that's very specialized. The other thing you'll find, and I would tell the SCs, is there's a continuum. So if you're running NetSuite, things that are like back office, like accounting, the main thing you want to do is ultimately we want to figure out how to make the cost per transaction the least possible. Like, we're looking for efficiency. And so a lot of what we do back here is standardization. So you can almost become prescriptive, like, this is how we should do it for a best practice, and you'd want to do it. Like, you don't necessarily have someone be like, I need you to reverse demo like entering your journal, because that would be that. But on the front, as you get closer to the customer, that's your secret sauce. And that's where things are going to have a lot of variability, because how one company and another in the same industry wants to interact with the customer, what they want to do, there's going to be a lot of differences. And that's where your customization comes in. And so the other thing I would do is, if you want to see like the system, you'd be amazed what you can glean from saying, show me how things look in Salesforce, that very front end, and what you're capturing about your customers and your orders, then saying, let me go see what your purchase order looks like. Because you can, many times you'll say, okay, that's great how you guys do purchase orders, but the truth, you need to do it the NetSuite way if you want to get the most return out of your investment. Right. But over here, we're going to do it. We need to do it exactly how you guys want to do it, because that's what makes you guys unique.
So just basically being able to recognize what you should encourage the customer to conform to inside of NetSuite versus customizing NetSuite to match their current processes.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I guess, so you would say the conform to NetSuite is going to be the back end accounting processes, because that's what NetSuite does well. And then the kind of customization side is going to be more as you get closer to the customer interface that the client is having with their customers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. And that's where, if you're saying, I've got limited 30 minutes with them to do a reverse demo or see, that's where you really want to spend your time, is like, let's focus on the front end, because it's easy for people to think, oh, I'd really love to see what your income statement looks like. Truthfully, they all look the same at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so, no one's going to be like, man, that's a killer 12-point type you've used with the Helvetica font on the,
really glad we spent 5
on your
minutes on
SG&A.
that.
Yeah, exactly. So versus the other piece, and so anytime there's like kind of that specialist, that's what really gets you where you'll get the most bang for your buck.
So I guess, like, because I've had some demos where I get on and like prepping more always leads to a better demo. But where do you draw the line between spending 9 hours going through like the customer's specific processes versus spending like 1 hour and building out a small piece of the customization that like they said mattered, but not going through the whole thing?
Got it. That's a great question, Becca, because it's easy to like want to boil the ocean, I know how.
Like, this is my job now. I'm going to spend 40 weeks and I'm building your whole thing in NetSuite, and it's going to be beautiful. It's the easiest 30-minute demo you've ever been on.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I've had both, and you'll run into this too, if and I know you already have, but like there was a time we had demos with Williams Sonoma, and then another one was with Spotify. And the boss, Harish, who was head of solution, he basically said, Chris, I'm clearing your schedule for a month. And each of those, he's like, I want you to just work on create exactly that, build whatever it is you think they need. And so I would literally end to end as deep as you could go. But that's rare because so many other, people listening to this, and I know you have to do this, many times you might have 2 or 3 demonstrations a day because you're carrying so many, and nobody can
do that intensive a build out.
Intense, and then it'll burn you out too because it'll do that. So what there, obviously size, importance of the logo, those are always your judgment calls. But what I think you want to do, one of the things that I love about NetSuite, when I've been at 2 other software companies now, and one of the things that I love about NetSuite is actually the way the demo accounts work. When you don't know any different, it's very easy to complain about the demo accounts. I did that for many, many years. However, Dave and Marina deserve a real shout out here because you can keep things. So I have a demo account that I kept for 7 years, and it became kind of like my bag of tricks. So I would remember, I did this. So one of the things is over the time, you kind of build like that. But that wasn't the best for sustainable things because it was always like locked up. It was only Chris knew what it was, and then I would have to do that. But so a really well-made demo account is they've done that has a lot of examples is like your first really thing that you can go and be like, okay, I know this example's in here, this example, and do that. I always think that the most important thing in a demo is kind of that sense of resonance. And that's like, how do things look? So it seems silly, but on the first hand, you'd think it would be the functionality. But when people look at a demo and it kind of looks and feels like their stuff, their industry, a customer that they might expect. Now, when they throw it for your loop, you can't do that. So then I say, okay, guys, I'm going to take you over here, and it's going to look nothing like your stuff. I kind of put that, but then they expect it. But when I look at the front, what I would do is like have really good examples, and then what I would do is modify, say, the customer name and do that. One of the things, and the people that, all 3 people that watch this will have heard me have to say, but when I was in grad school, we had a professor, Sinha, come from Harvard. He was like doing a guest lecture for a semester. And he worked, and one of the things he said was, guys, I worked for years and millions of dollars were spent to understand why is it that Pepsi wins 4 out of 5 in the quote unquote taste test, and yet Coca-Cola has 75% of the world market. They went through it all. And Malcolm Gladwell kind of talked about it in Blink, but he didn't get it right. In fact, Professor Sinha was like, he didn't get it right. But he said it came down to the color of the can. Literally, the red can versus the blue can explain almost the entire difference in market share between Pepsi and Coke. And so I've thought about that all the time. And so one of the things that in NetSuite people should spend their time doing when you're going through a lot of time prayer is always think of the color of the can. So if you know some of my demos, I work really hard to make sure the forms look right, that they're clean, that everything's laid out right.
Yeah, I saw one of your demos, and then I went and changed all of our invoices so that if you click the little PDF button, it looks really pretty.
Exactly.
Because if that ever comes up, you want it to look nice.
That's exactly right. Because when someone comes on to the screen, they don't tell you, but people spend the first 10, 15 minutes just trying to figure out what am I looking at here? You got this field, you're bouncing around, and you got this thing, and you're telling me this.
Well, I think it can be really helpful to remember, what did NetSuite look like when you first remember seeing it? Because I remember looking at it and seeing a blue bar and then a whole bunch of fields and no categorization. I was so confused.
Yes.
And I was like, everyone was like, well, our product sits here. And I was like, great. So it's just that general portion of the screen. But like that's what people are seeing when they're looking at NetSuite for the first time.
Yeah.
Which is what you're trying to help them take that, which is why I think using like the colored boxes and all of that kind of thing when you're demoing is really helpful. But
yes. Yeah, you're great at that. I have never been able to do those, so I just fumble around. But no, it's incredibly helpful. But so when you come back and think, if I had 30 minutes, I would need to do the pre-work and say, okay, I need to have good examples because they have to work out. And then if I had low time, I would make sure that I have like a reasonable customer name, a reasonable idea, and then I would go in and say and make sure that the forms look good and the colors were right. I know for an accounting software that seems incredibly silly, but time and time again, Professor Sinha has been true that people will buy NetSuite for the color of the can and the feel than functionality. Because I've won deals that I know we weren't the best functional fit, but we were able to deliver the most clarity to them to be able to say, I can see myself using this and doing this. And it's amazing how much just those aesthetic things really make a big difference.
I think that's a really good point. And something I like that takeaway of if you have an hour to prep for a demo, the most important thing is getting a good example. And then the second most important thing is just making it look nice.
Yeah.
Because I would not have put those as like that order of priority.
Yeah. No, I know. And you know, and you gotta kind of have it. The other thing is, the last thing I leave, Becca, is whenever I think something through, I kind of look at it as a process too. So the example, you have, what does it take kind of the foundation to get the transaction? Then I focus on the transaction or the record and make that look. And then I often will give like a report. You don't need 10 reports, but like if someone came to you and said, like we do a lease, the best things are like, how do I set up a lease? What does a lease record look like when it's all built out and pretty? Show me a journal entry that came from the lease record, and then one report that looks good. Like here's the output of the data, because it kind of becomes the reverse of that. Get the report. What data do I need to capture? What's the process look like to do that? And so a demonstration can go a good demo goes either way. But if you don't have kind of the concluding report, or you don't have an incomplete record that doesn't look right, it just misses the mark versus having something that's where people say, that's exactly what I would like to have, so.
Yeah, I think that is so important. Obviously, like the demo is such a big portion of what we do in our day-to-day jobs.
Yeah.
You even more so than me. So I guess taking all of that, kind of the pluses and not the pluses and cons, but taking the like do's and don'ts of demos and what we should be focusing on, going back to how we approach our job as an SC, trying to think if there's any other attributes specifically that we should be like focusing on.
Yeah. Let me give you a couple. So one of the story, so in our family growing up, like wrestling wasn't optional. Wrestling was required.
Okay.
And if you wanted to eat dinner, we had wrestling mats in our basement, and my dad was like, you got to go work out. The problem was, so I went about as far as I could, but I lost all the time. So I was at BYU, but I stunk. And basically I was the beat up guy. I was who they used when they wanted to have an easy day, and they're like, let's beat Chris Miller up. Okay. And so I would do that. Here's the funny thing. While that was like such an incredibly frustrating thing, learning how to deal with the adversity. So like in solution consulting, I would there's a lot of pressure on you. Like, let's face it, many times you have an AE and there's the commercials negotiation, and that's important, and then finding it. But between finding the customer and them saying, I'm willing to pay any amount, whatever you can negotiate, is really all on you and how much they're convinced. And so
how much value you're able to show them that they can get from this product.
And they not only buy the product, they buy you. And so learning how to like not necessarily lose, but be willing to take on really hard things has been like the thing that I think is what sets you apart if you want to be a really great solution consultant. Because there's always going to be the unknown. Yeah. And there's always going to be like, I don't know. And then there's going to be the pressure. And if you learn how to really embrace that, that's what makes you really, really good at doing that. Because, people will get stressed. They'll, and when you start getting that way, it does that. A common thing that would happen to me at NetSuite is I would have, and they meant well, but I would have many sales reps that when they didn't know me would be like, all right, now Chris, I just want you to understand that Jim McGeever or Zach Nelson or Evan is looking at this deal. This has high visibility. And I'd be like, every deal I'm on has Jim or Zach or Evan looking at it.
Like I know I'm on first name basis. This isn't a novelty.
There's no big deal. The pressure is like don't let it get to you, because then people press and you push and if you get, and as soon as you're not yourself, people feel that. And if you're like if you need it too much, then people naturally push back or hide. And our whole goal is like metaphorically for the customer is kind of come over and put your arm around them and be like, look, it's going to be okay. If you go with NetSuite, everything's going to be just fine. And I'm here to help you, get you to feel that way. And so that's, I think, one of the traits. The other one is you just have to have a huge curiosity. The last, I think, trait, that comes along with the curiosity, I don't know where I read this, but this is the second big piece of advice in my career that I've tried to follow, was in a book, and it was essentially this. It was talking about an accountant, and he's a 55-year-old accountant, and he comes and gets replaced by this guy who's 30 years old, and he's angry about it. Like, I have 35 years of experience in that. And what the premise was like, no, you don't. You have 5 years of experience, and then you've been coasting on that for the last 20 years, because people learn a lot in the first 5 years of their job. And then if you don't actually disrupt yourself or make an effort to do it, you kind of learn what you're doing, and you don't push yourself. And so the premise was, no 55-year-old accountant, the guy who's 30 is just as good at the job as you are, because you haven't been learning. And so one of the things what I love about this job, and one of the things I've actually consciously done, is push so that like I have these different 5-year periods, you could call it, where I'm learning new things and pushing that. So sometimes it's not like you have like one career experience, you have 5 years of career experience versus someone who just kind of was coasting. And to me, that's what can really make the best trait. If you're willing to push yourself, be kind of in uncomfortable areas, because in this solution consulting, you never run out of problems to solve. You may think,
the whole point is that you're a problem solver.
Yeah. You think, if I solve that problem, then what am I going to do? Well, there's always another problem that comes along for you to do it. So it's a good thing. But how about you? I'd love to know, as you've seen this, what traits?
Yeah. I would say it's honestly pretty similar. One of the pieces of advice I got early on was, rather than having your gut instinct saying, well, no, we don't do that in the software, instead say, maybe not out of the box, but let me look at if I could build it for you. And especially that's one of the reasons we like NetSuite, right? Is because there's so much customization that you can do inside of the system. So just looking at it as a let me try versus, oh no, that's going to be a lot of work. And I think there is, like, going back to like we were talking about before, right? Where you definitely want to look at how much time do I actually have to prepare? Is this a reasonable ask or not? But there's I feel like, especially with my age group, there's this desire to have new things in your life all the time. And so like you work at one job for 2 years and then you're like, meh, I've learned everything, right? And rather than sitting and coasting at this job, I want to engage in something different. And so rather than finding something new at that career, you go and you switch over to something else. And I'm totally guilty of it as well. But I think that within solution consulting, it's built into the career. And so it's a matter of, if you feel bored at work, that's probably because you haven't been searching out any new problems recently. Or you've been saying no to problems that you could go and spend some time seeing if you could fix.
I agree.
So just kind of taking that mindset on it of when someone comes to me and they're like, hey, we have this FX issue, and how does that apply to these leases, and how is that going to work in the system? And my immediate gut response is, oh, I don't like FX. I don't want to solve that problem. Instead of doing that, going, yeah, let me look at it. And then pushing myself beyond that comfortability level, or even just that sounds like a fun problem, I want to solve that one. Versus, well, that problem's not fun, I don't want to deal with that one. Like, you still have to push yourself, and then once you figure it out, like, I feel like those problems become fun. Like,
they are.
There's like the inventory to asset situation that was like a total headache, and I was avoiding it at all costs, and then I finally figured it out, and I was like, oh, this is entertaining. I actually enjoy this. And now I can go and demo it and have examples, right? I have my solution built out inside of a demo account. So just being able to take problems, identify which problems are going to be too time consuming, but which ones you're actually just kind of shying away from. And then building off of that to make sure that your career is continuing to go well, I guess, and learn more.
No, I agree, because having seen this at NetSuite, at Workday, and then having other connections here at NetGain places, there is no shortage of the need for people, who are willing to do just that. Like, I'll take on the hard thing. I'll figure it out.
Well, that's why you're successful.
And if you do that, it becomes a rare trait, and then people they're like, that's where you go to really understand it. And I think every solution desires to have that reputation or be known as that. And so, but it does take work, and it's funny because you think just as you're really good at something, that's probably when you need to move away from it and start working on another aspect or another piece to pick up.
Okay, well, I think that, I don't know, I feel like I got stuff out of this, so it was a really fun first episode. I feel like we definitely have a lot we want to cover through this podcast series, definitely going through different industries and specific industries of what we want to look at, as well as more of these kind of soft skill problems, as well as actual technical issues that we run into. So hopefully we'll be able to cover lots of different aspects of the solutioning job, whether you're in NetSuite or not.
Yep, I'll be looking forward to it a lot.
So yeah, thanks for joining me. Okay, so as far as calls to action, if you enjoyed this episode, we are going to be on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher. We're going to really kind of put these out fairly regularly, so hopefully you'll be able to just have kind of that little bump in your job and hopefully some good advice. So please follow us. We would love it. We
would, and please send reviews, because as soon as my kids see this, they're going to say, Dad, next to Do Perfect, you suck. So please help me out.
All right. Well, I'm Becca Smith, and I've been joined by Chris Miller. Thanks for listening to SC Corner. You can listen to us on any of your preferred streaming services, or you can always look up our products at netgain.tech.